Hello, my name is Pastor Kris Kollar. I'm the pastor of Pleasant Valley Lutheran Church near Malabar Farm State Park and St. Paul Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Greetings. We're reading through the Bible with commentary, and we are into a new book. We're up to the book of Job, spelled Job, J-O-B, but it's pronounced Job. And Job is a very ancient book, but we don't really know when exactly it was written. It is the beginning of what is known as the wisdom literature, which includes Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and Job. And Job answers a very ancient question. Why do bad things happen to good people? And actually doesn't really answer the question, but it definitely addresses the question. And I was reading through the preliminary material in my study Bible, and not going to read it to you. Lots of scholarly things about when was it written, and they don't know. And why was it written this way? They don't know. Was it written as one thing without, because it's got some very disjointed feeling. There's this story that's at the beginning and the end of the book of Job is kind of the story part that flows like just a story. And then in the middle, it is very much poetry. So was the poetry added later? Was the story added later? How does it work? And the answer is the scholars love to fight about these things and argue about things. There is no definitive answer. But what there is a very amazing book that I do agree with some of the preliminary things that said that basically this is one of the best, most widely read, widely received, widely appreciated book in both Christian and Jewish tradition. And it definitely addresses why do people suffer. I don't think it really answers that question sometimes. Some of the answer is we don't know. We are not God, and we cannot know all there is to know. There's a lot of really beautiful witness to God being God and we are not God in this book. So that will be a lot of what we read. Before I even get into it, I'm going to talk about the word Satan, because we're going to hear about Satan, which it says on my footnote, or the accuser, also known as Satan, Hasatan. Hasatan is the, as I'm reading through this whole big long explanation, there was not this duality of good and evil, God and Satan, because where did Satan come from? Satan is actually more like one of the divine council, and it's sort of like the prosecutor who comes and prosecutes people. And so if you have God the judge and somebody has a court case, there's a prosecutor who brings the case and says this person is guilty. And then there's the defender who covers and represents the defendant. So Hasatan or Hasatan or Satan is the accuser. It's the one who brings the case against people. Has other meanings as well, but do not think of Satan as, well, be careful how you think of Satan, because I don't know how you think of Satan, but there are certainly people who think of Satan as like the red devil with the pitchfork and the horns. This is not how this book is using the word Satan. It is not necessarily a single person or a duality between good and evil, God and Satan. It's much more, here's a person whose job it is to persecute, prosecute, bring accusations against people. So that's my preliminary introductory stuff to the book of Job. I'm not sure how many chapters I'm going to get, so I just put introduction without putting the chapters, I think. Let's see how far we can get. So, chapter 1. There was once a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. So it's a little bit of a once upon a time. It's a formulaic, back in the day, many days ago, long time ago, beginning to the story. And it's very much a story. Was there a historical man named Job who lived in a land named Uz? Maybe. More likely, it is more of a metaphorical, poetical poetry story. And the story has so much truth. So you don't have to say, oh, how can you say it's just a story? The Bible is true. The Bible is accurate and the Bible is truth. Well, yes, there is a great deal of truth presented in the form of poetry and storytelling. And you can hear a story, and the story is a fable or a moral, has a great amount of truth built into the story. And that is probably the case for Job. He probably was not a historical person who existed so much as a story that talks about why do things happen to us. The fancy theological term for that is theodicy. And why is there evil? Why do things happen? Why is God the way God is? Theodicy. But let's keep it simple. Chapter 1. There once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. That man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold feasts in each other's houses in turn. They would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the feast days had run their course, because why would you only feast for one day? Traditional, especially during Persian times, but traditional feasts lasted more than one day. So when they had run their course, Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This is what Job always did. So we've painted the picture, a very wealthy, very prosperous, very righteous man named Job, 10 kids, sacrifices on their behalf because maybe they might have sinned. So not only does he not sin, he tries to make sure that all of his kids' sins are covered as well. Verse 6. One day the heavenly beings, and it has here as sons of God, came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan, again that's the Hasatan, the accuser, also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, from walking up and down on it." Such a fun answer. Where have you been? Walking around, taking a look at things. Recently, a few months ago, I took a trip to Canada, and when I crossed the border agent asked me what I was going to do in Canada. I said, drive around and look at things. And that's what this answer reminds me of. What was Satan doing? Walking around, walking to and fro, walking around, looking. Verse 8. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There was no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Verse 9. Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." And I have occasionally heard this wonderful expression when people think that they're very strong in their faith. And the question is, are you strong in your faith, or have you just never been tested? Because that's basically what Satan is asking God. Well, yeah, he's doing good. He's got everything he wants. Why should he have any kind of hardship? Of course he's blameless. Of course he's upright. He's got no reason not to be. You've blessed him on every side. Verse 11, "But stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, all that he has is in your power. Only do not stretch out your hand against him." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So Hasatan, the accuser, is saying, if you take away all this stuff, he'll curse you. He's not really blameless and upright. Verse 13. One day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, And the Sabaeans fell on them and carried them off and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. So as we've been reading through Kings and Chronicles, so many times they conquered this city, they conquered that city, they raided this city, and they took all the stuff. And that is still the case here, that a group of people, the Sabaeans, have come and carried off the oxen and the donkeys. Verse 16, while he was still speaking, another came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. I alone have escaped to tell you. Verse 17, while he was still speaking, another came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 columns, made a raid on the camels and carried them off, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. So he's lost all the camels, the sheep, the oxen, and the donkeys. So all of the animals are now gone. Verse 18, while he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And suddenly a great wind came out from the desert, across the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. I alone have escaped to tell you. So he's lost all of his animals. He's lost all of his children, all 10 of his children. And it's just a grief I can't even begin to imagine. To lose one child is a terrible grief. To lose all 10 of your children all at the same time, and the same day as everything else. Unspeakable grief, just so incredibly painful that there's no words for that grief. Verse 20, then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this Job did not sin or charge God with wrongdoing. So Satan had said that Job will curse God to his face. And so now away have gone all of the animals and all of the children, and Job has not cursed God to his face. Job has blessed God. Job has said, I didn't have anything when I came. I won't have anything when I go. I'm going to bless the name of the Lord. Chapter 2. One day the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. It's just it's very poetical. This part is a story, but it's also got that rhythm of a story that's got some, not quite poetry, but close. Verse 3, the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who God fears and turns away from evil. He still persists in his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him for no reason. Then Satan answered him, skin for skin. All that people have they will give to save their lives. But if you stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, he will curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well, he is in your power, only spare his life. Verse 7, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and inflicted loathsome sores on Job from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Job took a potsherd, in other words, a piece of pottery, with which to scrape himself, and sat among the ashes. So now not only has he lost everything, he's broken out with a bunch of scabs and sores, and he's sitting there scraping them with a broken piece of pottery. Ugh. Verse 9, then his wife said to him, do you still persist in your integrity? Curse God and die. Poor Job's wife, she has also lost 10 children. She has also lost all of the riches that were represented. And now her husband's out there just scraping sores. Poor Job's wife, whose name we do not know. Verse 10, but he said to her, you speak as any foolish woman would speak. Shall we receive the good from the hand of the Lord and not receive the bad? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. So two very famous quotes. Naked I came, naked I will go. Shall we receive good and not the bad? Whatever the Lord wants to give, that's what we will receive. Verse 11, now when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in their hair upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. This is also one of the great lines in the book of Job. 3 great lines in the first 2 chapters, maybe more than 3, but the first 2 chapters of Job are just fabulous because these 3 friends hear about what's going on and they come to see Job, and it is so bad. It is so unspeakable. He was incredibly rich, all gone. He had 10 children, gone. He had health, gone. He's covered with sores. He's sitting in the dust. He's miserable. To lose 1 child is unspeakable grief. To lose 10 children, grown-up children, doesn't matter, 10 children, there's no way to say, there's no way to say that. There's no way to express the grief. So they sit with him for 7 days without saying a word. And sometimes that is the best thing that we can do for somebody, is to sit with them in their grief, to allow them to grieve, to allow them to just sit there and not have to say anything. And sometimes when people are grieving, other people come up and they're trying to be helpful and they say the most unhelpful things, the most terrible things. They say, oh, God must have needed another angel in heaven. No, that is not how that works. It is hard when a child dies and there is no words that will possibly bring that child back or will make that person feel better. If you lose a child, you have to grieve, and there's just no way around it. He's lost 10 of his children. He's also lost all of his animals, all of his wealth, everything. He is going to sit there and grieve, and his friends don't do great, but they do one thing right. When they first show up, they just sit there with him for 7 days in silence. So chapter 3, I'm like looking how we are for time. So that we start into a lot of poetry from this point forward. And I'll just say that after this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. So that's how chapter 3 opens up. And we're not going to read all of chapter 3 tonight. But when he does start to speak, when he does open his mouth, he curses the day that he was born. He's pretty miserable, and it's a pretty hard thing to lose. We just can't even imagine the kind of loss that he would have. And as we go through the book of Job, there is a lot of poetry. I'm not sure how long it's going to take us to get through the book of Job, but it very much talks about why do bad things happen. And this paints a picture of the Satan coming and accusing and God allowing this to happen. Sometimes things happen because we live in a world with physical rules. If you drop something, it falls. If you drive a car too fast, it crashes. There's just this collateral damage, I heard somebody call it recently, of people sinning, and the natural world with its natural laws mean that people sometimes get caught and get hurt physically or emotionally or some other way that people get hurt because we're full of sinners and we're full of a world with natural consequences. So sometimes we can say, oh, this is why this happened to you because that's the natural consequence for what you did. There's other times when we should have a consequence and we don't, or we get a consequence that we don't think we deserve. And why does that happen? How does that happen? And part of the answer is it just happens. And we will hear in this case that God basically says, where were you when we laid, I'm like, you weren't here, you don't know, you are not God, and you do not know. And that is the same for us. We are not God and we cannot know. Sometimes we get a glimpse. And there's been some times that I've looked back on the things in my life and I say, oh, that's why that had to happen. But when you're in the middle of it and the pain and the grief and it's so awful, then it's just going to be awful and it's just very hard. So if you are struggling with grief tonight, my heart goes out to you. You do need to allow yourself to feel that grief, because the only way you'll ever get through the grief is to allow yourself to feel the grief, and go through the grief is the only way through it is through it. So now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look at you with favor and give you peace. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Like, subscribe, comment. We will see you again next time. Thank you for being here.